Princess Helena of the United Kingdom. Princess Helena VACGBERRC, Helena Augusta Victoria, born on the May 25, 1846, died on the June 9, 1923. Later Princess Christian of Schleswig-Holstein, was the third daughter and fifth child of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. Helena was educated by private tutors chosen by her father and his close friend and advisor, Baron Stockmar. Her childhood was spent with her parents, traveling between a variety of royal residences in Britain. The intimate atmosphere of the royal court came to an end on December 14, 1861, when her father died and her mother entered a period of intense mourning. Afterwards, in the early 1860s, Helena began a flirtation with Prince Albert's German librarian, Karl Ruland. Although the nature of the relationship is largely unknown, Helena's romantic letters to Ruland survive. After her mother discovered the flirtations, in 1863, she dismissed Ruland, who returned to his native Germany. 3 years later, on July 5, 1866, Helena married the impoverished Prince Christian of Schleswig-Holstein. The couple remained in Britain, in calling distance of the Queen, who liked to have her daughters nearby. Helena, along with her youngest sister, Princess Beatrice, became the Queen's unofficial secretary. However, after Queen Victoria's death on January 22, 1901, Helena saw relatively little of her surviving siblings. Helena was the most active member of the royal family, carrying out an extensive program of royal engagements. She was also an active patron of charities, and was one of the founding members of the British Red Cross. She was founding president of the Royal School of Needlework, and president of the Workhouse Infirmary Nursing Association and the Royal British Nurses Association. As president of the latter, she was a strong supporter of nurse registration against the advice of Florence Nightingale. In 1916 she became the first member of her family to celebrate her 50th wedding anniversary, but her husband died a year later. Helena outlived him by 6 years, dying aged 77 in 1923. Helena had a firm interest in nursing, and was the founding chair of the Ladies' Committee of the British Red Cross in 1870, playing an active role in recruiting nurses and organizing relief supplies during the Franco-Prussian War. She subsequently became president of the British Nurses Association, RBNA, upon its foundation in 1887. In 1891, it received the prefix Royal, and received a royal charter the following year. She was a strong supporter of nurse registration, an issue that was opposed by both Florence Nightingale and leading public figures. In a speech Helena made in 1893, she made clear that the RBNA was working towards improving the education and status of those devoted and self-sacrificing women whose whole lives have been devoted to tending the sick, the suffering, and the dying. In the same speech, she warned about opposition and misrepresentation they had encountered. Although the RBNA was in favor of registration as a means of enhancing and guaranteeing the professional status of trained nurses, its incorporation with the Privy Council allowed it to maintain a list rather than a formal register of nurses. Following the death of Queen Victoria in 1901, the new Queen, Alexandra, insisted on replacing Helena as president of the Army Nursing Service. This gave rise to a further breach between the royal ladies, with King Edward VII caught in the middle between his sister and his wife. Lady Roberts, a courtier, wrote to a friend, "Matters were sometimes very difficult and not always pleasant." However, in accordance with rank, Helena agreed to resign in Alexandra's favor, and she retained presidency of the Army Nursing Reserve. Though thought to be merely an artifact created by society ladies, Helena exercised an efficient and autocratic regime. If anyone ventures to disagree with Her Royal Highness, she has simply said, "It is my wish, that is sufficient." The RBNA gradually went into decline following the Nurses Registration Act 1919, after 6 failed attempts between 1904 and 1918, the British Parliament passed the bill allowing formal nurse registration. What resulted was the Royal College of Nursing, RCN, and the RBNA lost membership and dominance. Helena supported the proposed amalgamation of the RBNA with the new RCN, but that proved unsuccessful when the RBNA pulled out of the negotiations. However, she remained active in other nursing organizations, and was president of the Isle of Wight, Windsor and Great Western Railway branches of the Order of St. John. In this position, she personally signed and presented many thousands of certificates of proficiency in nursing. Among Helena's other interests was writing, especially translation. In 1867, when the first biography of her father, the Prince Consort, was written, the author, Sir Charles Grey, notes that the Prince's letters were translated, from German to English, by Helena with surprising fidelity. Other translations followed, and in 1887 she published a translation of the Memoirs of Wilhelmine, Margravine of Bayreuth. It was noted by the Saturday Review that Helena wrote an English version that was thoroughly alive, with a sound dictionary translation and a high accuracy and spirit. Her final translation was undertaken in 1882, on a German booklet called First Aid to the Injured, originally published by Christian's brother-in-law. It was republished several times until 1906. Helena's favorite son, Prince Christian Victor, died in 1900, followed 3 months later by her mother Queen Victoria, who died at Osborne House on January 22, 1901. The new king, Edward VII, did not have close ties with his surviving sisters, with the exception of Princess Louise. Helena's nephew, Prince Alexander of Battenberg, later Marquis of Carisbrooke, recorded that Queen Alexandra was jealous of the royal family, and would not invite her sisters-in-law to Sandringham. Moreover, Alexandra never fully reconciled herself to Helena and Christian following their marriage controversy in the 1860s. Helena saw relatively little of her surviving siblings, and continued her role as a support to the monarchy and a campaigner for the many charities she represented. She and Christian led a quiet life, but did carry out a few royal engagements. On one such occasion, the elderly couple represented the king at the silver wedding anniversary, in 1906, of Kaiser Wilhelm II, Helena's nephew, and his wife Augusta Victoria, Christian's niece. During the Edwardian period, Helena visited the grave of her son, Prince Christian Victor, who died in 1900 following a bout with malaria while serving in the Second Boer War. She was met by South African Prime Minister Louis Botha, but Jan Smuts refused to meet her, partly because he was bitter that South Africa had lost the war and partly because his son had died in a British concentration camp. In 1902, Prince and Princess Christian moved to Schomburg House, 77-78 Pall Mall, London, half of which is now part of the Oxford and Cambridge Club. Before the First World War, she was one of the few maternal relatives that her nephew Kaiser Wilhelm II was close to. When he welcomed his first child, he went against Prussian tradition by asking Helena, not his mother, to assign a nurse for his son, causing a family scandal. King Edward died in 1910, and the First World War began 4 years after his death. Helena devoted her time to nursing, and her daughter, Princess Marie-Louise, recorded in her memoirs that requests for news of loved ones reached Helena and her sisters. It was decided that the letter should be forwarded to Crown Princess Margaret of Sweden, Princess Helena's niece, as Sweden was neutral during the war. It was during the war that Helena and Christian celebrated their golden wedding anniversary in 1916, and despite the fact that Britain and Germany were at war, the Kaiser sent a congratulatory telegram to his aunt and uncle through the Crown Princess of Sweden. King George V and Queen Mary were present when the telegram was received, and the king remarked to Helena's daughter, Marie-Louise, that her former husband, Prince Aribert of Anhalt, did her a service when he turned her out. When Marie-Louise said she would have run away to Britain if she was still married, the king said, with a twinkle in his eye, that he would have had to intern her. In 1917, in response to the wave of anti-German feeling that surrounded the war, George V changed the family name from Saxe-Coburg and Gotha to Windsor. He also disposed of his family's German titles and styles, so Helena and her daughters simply became Princess Christian, Princess Helena Victoria and Princess Marie-Louise with no territorial designation. Helena's surviving son, Albert, fought on the side of the Prussians, though he made it clear that he would not fight against his mother's country. In the same year, on 28th of October, Prince Christian died at Schomberg House. Helena's last years were spent arguing with commissioners, who tried to turn her out of Schomberg House and Cumberland Lodge because of the expense of running her households. They failed, as clear evidence of her right to live in those residences for life was shown. Princess Helena died at Schomberg House on June 9, 1923 at the age of 77. Her funeral, described as a magnificently stage-managed scene by her biographer Søren Chaumet, was headed by King George V. The regiment of her favorite son, Prince Christian Victor, lined the steps of St. George's Chapel at Windsor Castle. Although originally interred in the royal vault at St. George's on June 15, 1923, her body was reburied at the Royal Burial Ground, Frogmore, a few miles from Windsor, after its consecration on October 23, 1928. Thanks for watching HerStory channel. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe our channel.